What kind of man gets new financial rules from his mother-in-law in the middle of his own wedding reception and just stands there while his bride says nothing? How did one phone call from the bank, just hours later, turn that public humiliation into a quiet, legal reckoning they never saw coming? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Mark, I am 41, and on the day I got married, I learned exactly how little respect some people had for me. The reception hall was beautiful. At least that part went right. There were chandeliers hanging over white tablecloths, soft music, and small golden lights wrapping around every column. People said the place looked like a movie. I stood there in my suit next to my new wife, Hannah, thinking that maybe all the stress had been worth it. Hannah looked amazing. She had this easy, bright smile that made guests want to hug her, take pictures, tell her she looked perfect. I watched her move from table to table, laughing and touching arms. She fit into that room like it was built around her. When people came up to me, most of them said I was lucky. They told me I had married up, that I must have done something right. I heard that line many times. Her mother, Patricia, treated the day like it was her own event. She walked around with a clipboard and an air of authority, giving instructions to the staff, correcting the DJ, telling the photographer where to stand. She liked to call herself detail-oriented. What she really was controlling. I had seen it before, but I told myself it came from love for her daughter. That was what Hannah always told me. For a while, it felt normal. We had the first dance. My younger brother, Ryan, made a funny toast where he talked about how serious I used to be as a kid. Hannah's best friend told a story about their college days. People laughed and clapped. I watched Hannah's eyes shine and thought about how I had paid for almost everything in that room and how I was okay with that. I wanted her to have the day she dreamed about. At our table, between speeches, Patricia hovered. She made little comments about the bar tab and the extra guests who had arrived without RSVPs. She said she would send me the updated numbers later so I could work them into my spreadsheets. She liked to joke that I treated money like a science project. I tried to laugh along, but it always felt more like a dig than a joke. Then, at some point between the salads and the main course, Patricia tapped a spoon against her glass. The room got quieter. The DJ lowered the music. People turned toward her. I expected some emotional speech about watching her daughter grow up. I prepared my polite smile. Patricia announced that she wanted to say a few practical words now that, in her words, I was officially part of the Carson family system. She called it that, the Carson family system. People laughed, thinking she was making a small joke. I knew better. I saw the papers she had stacked at her place setting, clipped together. She started to talk about money. At first, it sounded like general advice. She told everyone that marriages needed clear structures, especially with finances. She said that in this family they did things properly, and that this approach had kept them safe for years. The way she said it made it sound like I was being invited into a club. Then she moved on to specifics. She told the room that starting from that day, she expected me to participate in their family fund. She explained that all incomes in their family were handled as one pool. She said she had set up a Carson family account where contributions were made monthly, and that she and her husband, Ken, oversaw it. She praised the system as fair and efficient. She said it would keep Hannah from ever worrying about bills again. She explained that I would be moving all my current personal accounts into this structure over the next few weeks. She said she had already drafted some forms to help me do it quickly. She casually mentioned that I would also be helping pay off some outstanding debts in the family, like Hannah's sister's car loan, because that was what real providers did. People looked at me. Some had polite, confused smiles. Some clearly enjoyed the show. A few looked embarrassed on my behalf. I could feel their eyes on my face, waiting for my reaction. I turned my head toward Hannah. She was sitting there, cheeks a little pink, but she did not speak. She stared at the table, then at her champagne glass. Her hand rested on mine, but she did not squeeze it. She did not tell her mother to stop. She did not say this was private. She just let it happen. Patricia continued talking. She said that I was very quiet, but that she knew from experience that numbers men like me needed strong guidance. She told everyone that with her help, we would never fall into financial chaos. She thanked me in front of the room for trusting her to manage it. She said that if everyone followed the rules, including me, we would all be fine. I heard a small laugh from a table near the back when she used the word rules. I heard someone whisper something about me being trained. Another guest joked loudly that I was being adopted into a new accounting system. The DJ tried to soften it by playing music as she wrapped up, but the damage was done. I kept my face calm. That is something I am good at. My job in finance trained me to keep my expression steady in front of clients, even when they say something insulting or ridiculous, so I sat there feeling humiliated, but my features did not change much. Inside, though, my chest felt tight. Patricia ended by telling everyone that she would share the written guidelines with the young couple later, and that soon money would not be something we ever had to argue about. She emphasized again that I was lucky to be joining a family with a proven system. Then she raised her glass in a toast to our future. Some people clinked glasses, some looked down. My brother met my eyes from across the room and shook his head very slightly. The music came back up. Conversations picked up again, but now I could feel the tone had changed. Where before people had seen me as the quiet, stable groom, now I could tell some of them saw me as something else, a project, a wallet, a man being told how to behave. While Hannah talked to one of her cousins, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I ignored it. I wanted to focus on her, on anything except the burning in my face from that speech. It buzzed again, then again. Whoever it was, they were persistent. I slipped my hand into my pocket and glanced at the screen. The caller ID showed the name Laura Chen. She was my bank manager, the one who had known me for years, who had seen my accounts grow slowly and steady. She was not someone who called without a good reason, and never 3 times in a row. The buzzing would not stop. I excused myself from the table, told Hannah quietly that I needed to take a work call, and walked toward the side doors leading to the terrace. The sound of music and clinking glasses faded a little as the doors closed behind me. Outside, the air was cooler. Fairy lights wrapped around the railings. I stepped away from the windows so people could not easily read my face. I answered the call. Laura's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it I recognized. She asked if I had a moment in a private place. I told her I was at my wedding reception, but I was outside. She apologized for interrupting such a day, but explained that something urgent had come through, and she did not feel comfortable waiting. She told me that earlier that day, during the ceremony, the bank had received instructions regarding one of my main accounts. The instructions requested that a new authorized person be added, a woman with the last name Carson, Patricia's last name. The request also included a note that a large sum was to be transferred into a new account labeled as a family fund. Laura said the instructions referenced my recent marriage and attached a copy of a marriage certificate. She asked if I had approved this, if this was part of an arrangement I had discussed. I felt the world tilt a little. I asked her, in a low voice, to repeat the part about the marriage certificate. She confirmed that there was a scan of it attached. She reminded me that the bank took that kind of document very seriously. Behind the glass doors, I could see Hannah laughing at something her bridesmaid said. Patricia stood near the cake, speaking to the venue manager with that same authoritative posture. For a moment, it felt like I was watching them through a screen, like someone else's life. Laura said she had put the request on hold because it did not sound like something I would set up without calling her first. She wanted my direct confirmation. She asked if she should proceed, deny it, or take additional steps. The cool evening air did nothing for the heat rising in my chest now. The speech, the laughter at our table, and now this silent attempt to change my accounts during the ceremony itself, all stacked together in my mind like files in a folder. I did not raise my voice. I told Laura that I had not authorized any changes, that no one should be added to my accounts, and that no transfers to any new family fund should go through. I asked her to freeze everything connected to that request, and to mark my profile so that nothing could be altered without direct contact with me. She understood. Then her tone shifted even more serious. She told me that the timing and the use of the marriage certificate made the situation sensitive. She explained that if someone tried again, or if any unauthorized access happened, we might have to treat it as attempted fraud. She asked if I wanted her to document this call thoroughly. I looked back at the hall, at the warm lights, at my wife who had not said a word when her mother announced rules for my money. I thought about the way Patricia had casually mentioned forms and accounts during that speech, as if decisions had already been made. I told Laura to document everything. She confirmed that she would. Then she told me one more detail. The request had arrived almost exactly at the time Hannah and I had been saying our vows. She called that an interesting coincidence and left the words hanging in the air. My hand tightened around the phone. She asked one last time if I wanted her to hold all actions on that account until I came in person. I told her I did. She said she would lock it down, send me the full record of the attempted changes, and wait for my visit. When I ended the call, I did not go straight back into the hall. I stood there, listening to the muffled music through the door, watching shadows move across the curtains. Inside, people thought of this day as the start of something soft and romantic. Standing there with my phone still in my hand, it felt more like a line had just been drawn. I slid the phone into my pocket and walked past the terrace rail, down the small steps toward the parking lot, away from the noise and the lights of my own celebration, while Laura's last words about the marriage certificate echoed in my head. The wedding reception did not stop just because I walked toward the parking lot. The music kept playing, people kept laughing. A car pulled in, backed out again. I stood near the edge of the asphalt, hands in my pockets, looking at nothing. I knew I could not stay out there forever. If I did, people would talk even more. I took a few deep breaths, tried to smooth my face, and walked back up the steps to the terrace. Through the glass doors, I saw Hannah looking around the room, as if searching for someone. When she spotted me outside, her shoulders lowered in relief. She looked worried, but also annoyed, like she thought I was making things harder than they needed to be. I went back in. The warm air, the strong smell of food and perfume, the noise hit me again. Hannah came up and asked where I'd gone. I told her I needed to take a call from the bank, and that it could not wait. I did not mention the words unauthorized person or marriage certificate. Not yet. This did not feel like the moment. She said that I should have told her before I walked out because guests were asking. She said her mother had asked where I had disappeared to and that she did not like the look on Patricia's face. I told her I would explain later. Hannah looked at me for a long second, then forced a smile and suggested we cut the cake. So we did. We posed for photos. We fed each other small bites of cake. People cheered. On the outside, we looked like a normal couple in love. Inside, my mind kept returning to the fact that, while we had been saying vows earlier that day, someone had sent my bank a picture of our marriage certificate and tried to move my money. As the night went on, I noticed new looks from some of the guests. I heard one of Hannah's cousins make a joking comment about me joining the hive. Later, I caught a piece of a conversation near the bar. Someone said that Patricia always got people in line sooner or later. Someone else said that at least Hannah had a man who could pay for everything now. I did not start any fights. I hugged people. I thanked them for coming. I smiled on command for the photographer. But my thoughts kept drifting backwards to how we reached this point. When I first met Hannah, she worked at the front desk of the company building next to mine. I was coming out of a late meeting, tired, holding a folder of numbers, when she made a small joke about how serious I looked. She said I always seemed to be carrying the weight of the stock market on my shoulders. It made me laugh. We started talking. She was bright, funny, and good at reading people. She said she liked that I was stable, that I did not act like a teenager in a man's body. She told me I made her feel safe. I liked that. I had always been the responsible one, at least in our family. My brother Ryan loved that I had his back when we were kids. My father had trusted me early with small financial tasks. It felt natural. Back then, Hannah lived with a roommate and talked about how tired she was of worrying about rent and bills all the time. She said she had grown up watching her parents fight about money. She wanted something different. She told me she admired how I handled my own finances. I did not brag, I just told her I liked to plan. I took her out to simple places at first, small restaurants, calm bars, walks in the park. She said she did not care about fancy things. She told me that being with someone kind and steady mattered more. I believed her. The first time I met her mother was a few months into our relationship. Hannah invited me to dinner at their house. I bought flowers and a bottle of wine, wanting to make a good impression. Patricia greeted me with a big smile and loud compliments, but also sharp eyes that scanned my clothes, my shoes, my watch. She asked what I did for work. When I told her I was a financial analyst for a logistics company, she made a comment that at least I understood money. She said Hannah had dated too many dreamers who could not pay their own phone bills. We all sat at the table. The food was good. Ken, her husband, was quiet, kind, and tired-looking. He asked a few questions about my job and my family. Patricia, on the other hand, kept circling back to money. She asked how long I had been with the company. She asked about promotions. She asked if I owned my apartment or rented. She asked if I had any debt. I answered calmly, but I did not give her every detail. She did not like that. She teased me about being secretive and said she hoped I was not hiding anything important from Hannah. She laughed when she said it, but her eyes did not laugh. Later that night, Hannah apologized. She said her mother could be intense. She said it came from a place of care because Patricia had watched friends lose everything during bad investments. She asked me to be patient. I said I would try. As the relationship got more serious, Patricia's presence got stronger. She had opinions about where we should live, what kind of car we should buy, how big the wedding should be, and who should pay for what. Anytime I suggested a smaller, more practical option, she would shake her head and say that Hannah deserved more. When we got engaged, Hannah cried from happiness. Patricia cried too, but for a different reason. She said our engagement was proof that Hannah was finally moving into the right lane in life. She said I seemed reliable and that she approved. It was strange to hear that word used like that, as if I were an application she had signed. We started wedding planning. That was when the small jokes about my spreadsheets began. Patricia would call me the numbers guy and say that I probably weighed each flower petal like a gold coin. She said she was glad someone in the family took money seriously, but she also made it clear that she thought I needed direction. She pushed for a large venue, a live band, special lighting, and a long guest list. When I hesitated at the costs, she told me she would contribute in other ways. Those other ways always seemed to involve my time, my planning, and my credit card. Before we moved in together, Hannah had credit card debt from her early 20s. She told me she felt ashamed of it. I offered to help. I paid off a big chunk of it to give us a clean start. She was grateful and cried when I did. She said no one had ever taken care of her like that. Patricia, however, called it a basic duty of a future husband. She actually used the phrase bare minimum. That stuck with me. There were other moments. One time, Patricia suggested we combine all accounts into one big shared pot, even before the wedding. She said that was how real families did it. I said I was okay with a joint account for shared expenses, but I wanted to keep some savings separate, just as I had always done. Hannah accepted that. Patricia did not. She made a remark that separate savings were dangerous and that men who wanted separate accounts were planning to leave. Another time, during a dinner at their house, she brought up her other daughter's car loan. She said the interest rate was terrible and the payments were a strain. She then looked at me and asked if I could help them restructure things. I thought she meant advice. When I started asking about the numbers, she waved her hand and said she was really asking if I could step in and pay off the loan, since I was much better off. Hannah looked embarrassed but did not speak up. I told Patricia I would think about it. She reacted like I had rejected them personally. Over time, these moments built a pattern. They were small stones, one on top of another, forming a wall I did not see clearly until that night at the wedding, when Patricia stood with a microphone and spoke about rules. After the reception finally wound down, Hannah and I left for the hotel. Guests clapped as we walked through the lobby, tired and smiling for show. In the elevator, there was an awkward silence between us. She rested her head on my shoulder. I put my arm around her because that was what I was supposed to do, but my mind was still with Laura's phone call. In the hotel room, Hannah kicked off her shoes and sat on the edge of the bed. She said her feet were killing her. I loosened my tie, hung up my jacket, and sat in a chair across from her. She asked again what the phone call was about. Her tone was light at first, but there was sharpness under it. I told her it had been Laura from the bank. I explained that during the ceremony, the bank had received instructions to add Patricia as an authorized person on my account and to move a large sum into a new family fund account. I told her that a copy of our marriage certificate was attached and that I had never given anyone permission for that. Hannah stared at me. At first, she looked confused, then defensive. She said there must be some mistake. She said her mother probably thought she was helping us combine finances quickly since we had talked about merging things after the wedding. She said I knew Patricia liked to act fast. I told her that acting fast did not mean trying to attach her name to my account behind my back. I reminded her that we had never agreed to let her mother handle our accounts. I said that doing it at the exact time we were saying vows made it even worse. Hannah tried to calm the situation down by saying it was paperwork, nothing more. She suggested we could just tell Patricia not to send any more forms without checking with us. She said I should not make a big deal out of it, especially not in front of her family. She reminded me that Patricia had thrown herself into planning the wedding and was probably exhausted. I told her that this was not just about feelings. This was about trust. I said that someone had used our legal document, our marriage certificate, to push through changes at my bank. I said that if I had not picked up Laura's call, things could already be different. Hannah's face tightened. She said that she wished I would see that her mother only wanted to protect us. She said that Patricia had grown up poor, had seen financial disasters, and that control made her feel safe. She suggested that maybe letting Patricia oversee things for a while would not be so bad. She even said that it might be easier for her if her mother handled the boring money details. That last part hit me harder than I expected. I had thought Hannah wanted independence from her mother's constant control. Now it sounded more like she wanted to give in fully, as long as someone else made sure the bills were paid. I asked her directly if she believed it was okay for Patricia to have access to my personal accounts. She avoided a clear answer. She said something about how in her family everything was shared and how we needed to adjust. She hinted that Patricia was worried I might be hiding money, that separate accounts made her uneasy. I sat there, listening, feeling something quiet and solid forming inside me. It was not rage, it was more like a lock clicking into place. A part of me that had been open and flexible started to close. We went back and forth for a while. I stayed calm. I explained that I would not add Patricia to any account, that I would not move my savings into a pool she controlled. Hannah said that made her feel like I did not trust her family. I answered that her family had just tried to make major changes to my finances without my consent, using our wedding as cover. I said trust went both ways. She turned away from me and lay back on the bed. She said she did not want to fight on our wedding night, that this was supposed to be our first peaceful evening as husband and wife. She asked if we could just sleep and talk about it later, maybe with her mother there to explain. I did not like the idea of talking about it later with Patricia in the room, but I was tired. I told Hannah we could revisit it after we both had some rest. I did not promise anything more. The room went quiet. The sound of traffic outside the window filled the space between us. My mind would not slow down. I kept seeing Patricia at the microphone, hearing her say the word rules. I kept hearing Laura say fraud and marriage certificate. As I sat there, staring at the carpet, Hannah's phone lit up on the nightstand. A new message popped onto the screen. I could not see all of it from where I sat, but I saw Patricia's name at the top and the first line of the text. She was telling Hannah that tomorrow they would have a proper talk with me. She said she would explain the family system so I would understand what an opportunity it was. The screen went dark again, leaving the room in dim yellow light. The next morning, Hannah acted like nothing serious had happened. We woke up late in the hotel room. My back hurt from the thin mattress and from not really sleeping. Hannah rolled toward me, hair messy, and said that today would be better once everyone calmed down. She talked about brunch, gifts, and how her mother wanted us to stop by the house for just a small talk before we went back to our apartment. When she used those words, small talk, I felt my jaw tighten. On the drive to her parents' place, she tried to make light conversation. She pointed out a cafe she liked, asked what I thought of the photographer, talked about which pictures she wanted printed. I answered, but my mind was somewhere else. I was thinking about the bank, about the words suspicious instructions, about how easily this could have gone through if Laura had not called. Hannah noticed how quiet I was. She asked if I was still upset about the speech. She said I needed to understand that her mother was dramatic and that people expected that from her. She said that Patricia did not mean to hurt me, she just had a strong personality. I told her I could handle a strong personality. What I could not handle was someone trying to attach themselves to my accounts behind my back. I reminded her of the marriage certificate. Hannah sighed and said again that it must have been a misunderstanding, that Patricia probably thought we had talked about combining things. She said we should let her explain herself. I did not answer that. I just kept driving. The Carson house looked the same as always from the outside. Neat lawn, big front porch, flower pots arranged perfectly. It had that magazine family look that Patricia liked to show off. Inside, the atmosphere felt different from other visits. There were no smells of cooking, no music. Instead, there was a quiet tension. The dining table was cleared, but the kitchen island was covered with papers, notebooks, and a laptop. Patricia stood behind the island like she was running a meeting. Ken sat at one end of the table with a mug of coffee, shoulders slightly hunched. Hannah's sister and brother were there too, both with coffee cups in their hands. They looked curious more than anything else. Patricia greeted us with a big smile and a long hug for Hannah. For me, she offered a quick side hug and called me our new man of the house. The way she said it did not sound like praise. It sounded like a title she intended to manage. She told us all to sit down because she had made an agenda. She actually used that word. There was a printed sheet with bullet points in front of her. It made me think of the project meetings I ran at work, except this time I was the project. First, she talked about how beautiful the wedding had been. She said she was proud of how everything turned out. She took credit for the timing, the decorations, the vendor choices. She mentioned how many people told her the event felt high class. Hannah listened with a soft smile, used to this kind of speech. Then Patricia shifted the topic. She said that now the celebration was over, it was time to move into the structure that kept their family safe, especially in difficult times. She talked about how she and Ken had helped family members in the past, how they had kept everyone from falling into financial chaos. She said that now that I had joined their family, it only made sense that I be brought into that structure too. She grabbed a folder and pulled out some forms. She said she had already spoken with someone at the bank and had sent instructions to make things easier for me. She explained that in their family, paychecks went into a central account. From there, she and Ken made sure all key expenses were covered. She said it helped prevent surprises and selfish spending. She described it like she was presenting a tested system, like a template I should be grateful to join. I asked, in a calm voice, who exactly had access to this central account. She answered that she did, of course, since she handled the details. She said Ken could also access it, but that he trusted her to manage most of it. She said that once the setup was complete, Hannah and I would still be able to make day-to-day decisions, but that big moves would go through her. Hannah's sister chimed in, saying that it had worked fine for her. Then she laughed and thanked Patricia again for helping with her car payments. That comment made the air heavier. I asked another quiet question. I wanted to know why Patricia had used our marriage certificate and sent instructions to my bank before we had even talked about this as a couple. I wanted to know why she thought that was acceptable. Patricia did not look embarrassed. She looked slightly annoyed that I had pulled the curtain back in front of everyone. She said she thought she was doing us a favor by getting ahead of the paperwork. She said I was busy and that handling forms was her way of contributing. She claimed she assumed I would be fine with it because it was obviously the logical choice. Then she moved on like it was already decided. She said we could start with me adding her as an authorized person on my main account. She said that later we could merge my other savings and investments into the family fund so we could achieve more together. She added that, of course, I would need to help clear some existing obligations, like the rest of Hannah's old debt and her sister's car loan, but that it would all balance out in the long term. I looked at Hannah. She was chewing her lip. She did not look shocked. She looked nervous. When our eyes met, she gave a small shrug, the kind people give when they want to say, please just go along with this. I turned back to Patricia and told her, still calmly, that I would not be adding her to my accounts. I said that I was open to a simple joint account for shared expenses between Hannah and me, but that my personal accounts would stay under my sole control. I said that I did not agree with a central family pool managed by someone outside our marriage. For a second, the room went very quiet. Patricia smiled, but it was a thin, sharp smile now. She said that she understood I was old-fashioned and maybe a little anxious about letting go. She told the others that some men had a hard time adjusting when they married into a stronger family structure. She said that in time I would see that her way worked. I repeated my answer. I told her I was not confused and that my decision was final. I said politely that she had no permission to contact my bank or handle my documents. That was when she dropped the friendly tone completely. She told me that if I wanted to be part of their family, I needed to understand that they did things together. She said that keeping separate accounts was a sign of distrust. She said that a man who refused to share fully must have something to hide. She hinted, in front of everyone, that maybe I wanted to keep my money away from Hannah. I felt my face get hot, but my voice stayed even. I said that I loved Hannah and that I had already paid for most of the wedding and cleared a big part of her debt. I said that this was not about hiding anything, it was about boundaries. Patricia laughed. She said that paying for a wedding and helping with debt was, in her words, the bare minimum for a real husband. She looked straight at me and said that, honestly, Hannah could have chosen someone with more ambition and flash, but she chose me because I seemed stable. She said that stability came with responsibility, and that part of that responsibility was trusting her system. Some of the family laughed with her. Ken stared at his coffee. Hannah's brother looked uncomfortable. Her sister watched me closely, as if measuring my reaction. I glanced at Hannah again, hoping she would say something like this had gone too far. Instead, she looked at her mother and then at me and said quietly that maybe we could compromise. She suggested putting Patricia on just one account, for emergencies. She said we could try it for a year and see how it went. Hearing Hannah say that in front of everyone felt like someone had taken a small hammer to the side of my skull. It did not knock me down, but it rang. I realized then that this was not simply Patricia pushing her agenda. This was also Hannah choosing not to stand next to me when it mattered most. She was standing between us, trying to keep the peace by leaning toward her mother's side. Patricia saw my hesitation and pressed harder. She said that a real provider did not cling to control. She said that if I wanted to prove I was not small-minded or insecure, I would sign the forms and stop making a scene. She added that this family took care of its own with or without me, and that it would be easier if I cooperated. The words with or without you went into me like a nail. I stopped trying to argue. The outcome of this conversation was already clear. It did not matter what logic I used. Nothing I said would change Patricia's belief that she had the right to my money. Nothing I said right now would make Hannah push back against her mother. So I changed something inside myself instead. I told Patricia that I would not be signing anything that day. I said that I would review any documents through my own channels and make decisions later. I stayed polite. I did not raise my voice. I simply put a wall between them and my finances. Patricia's smile vanished. She said that I was being ungrateful after all they had done. She said that in this family, everyone contributed, and if I could not accept that, then maybe I was not ready to be part of it. Her tone made it clear she thought I would fold in a few days. Hannah grabbed my arm and asked if we could talk alone. We stepped into the hallway. She asked me why I was being so stubborn. She said I was making her mother feel disrespected. I answered that respect was a two-way path, and that her mother had just tried to reorganize my entire financial life without a real conversation. Hannah said she just wanted everyone to get along. She said it would be easier if I trusted her mother. I said again, in a quiet voice, that I would not. We left the house not long after that. The drive back to our apartment was quiet. Hannah stared out the window. I watched the road and the lines passing under the car. At home, she threw her bag on the couch and said she needed a shower. Her voice was cold. She told me that I had embarrassed her mother in front of the family. She said that everyone thought I was paranoid now. I did not reply. I could not think of anything that would not start another fight. When she disappeared into the bathroom, I walked into the small kitchen and leaned against the counter. The apartment felt different now, even though nothing had changed physically. The same fridge magnet with a picture of us, the same stack of bills, the same couch. But the space between those objects felt like it had shifted. I could see a future where every argument, every big decision, had Patricia's voice in the background. I thought of my own family then. I thought of my father sitting at our old kitchen table, showing me how to balance a checkbook, explaining what a trust was in simple words. He had not been rich, but he had been careful. Before he died, he had told me he wanted to make sure no one could push me around with money. He had worked with a lawyer to set up some things for my future. At the time, I thought it was just his way of feeling useful when he was sick. Now, standing in my kitchen after a weekend of public speeches and secret bank requests, his decision seemed like the only smart thing in my life that I had not made myself. I opened a drawer where I kept important papers. There, in a worn folder, was the business card of the lawyer my father had used, along with some old notes. The name on the card was Martin Hale. I had met him a few times, usually once a year, for a quick review of my situation. We adjusted nothing most years. It was more habit than necessity. I did not pull out the contracts. I did not read any fine print that night. I just held the card in my fingers and remembered how my father had said that if life ever got messy, I should not try to handle everything alone. He had said that money made people strange, and that it was wise to have someone who understood the rules better than they did. The bathroom fan hummed. Water ran behind the closed door. Hannah's voice played faintly as she talked to someone on speakerphone. I guessed it was Patricia. I did not try to listen to the words. I set the card down on the counter. My phone, which I had left on the table, buzzed. I went over and picked it up. A notification popped up on the screen. It was from my calendar app, something I had set months ago and forgotten about. It reminded me of an appointment scheduled for Monday morning, an annual review with Hale & Associates, the same legal firm my father had used. It was supposed to be a routine check, like every year. I stared at that small rectangle of text for a long time, feeling that quiet lock inside me click one step tighter. Then I reached out and tapped the button to confirm that I would attend. On Monday morning, I went back to work. Nothing in the office knew that my mother-in-law had announced rules for my money at my wedding, or that someone had tried to attach her name to my accounts during the ceremony. The elevator still opened at the same speed. The coffee machine still hissed. My computer still took too long to start. I sat at my desk in my small glass-walled office and opened my emails. There were routine messages about budgets, shipping costs, and vendor payments. My coworkers knocked on the door to ask for help with spreadsheets. My manager stopped by and thanked me for catching a mistake in a cost forecast the week before. He said that my careful eye had saved the company a lot of money. At work, my tendency to double-check things was a strength. People depended on it. Nobody there called me controlling for wanting numbers to be correct. Nobody joked that I needed guidance. That contrast quietly sharpened everything that had happened over the weekend. Around mid-morning, when the rush of emails slowed, I picked up my phone and called Laura at the bank. I told her I wanted to come in and talk through what had happened in detail. She said she had already flagged my profile and that she could see me that afternoon if I had time. I told my manager I needed to take care of some personal paperwork after lunch. He nodded and said that was fine. The bank branch was across town, so I drove there right after a quick sandwich at my desk. The building had glass walls and fake plants and the same quiet, controlled air I had always liked. It made me feel like things were in order. Laura met me in a small office with frosted glass. She had a folder in front of her and a serious look on her face. She did not start with small talk. She went straight to the point. She told me that on the day of my wedding, during the time frame of the ceremony, the bank system had received digital instructions concerning one of my main accounts. The request had tried to add a person with the last name Carson as an authorized individual. It had also asked for a transfer from my savings into a newly created account with a label that referred to a family fund. There was a short note attached that mentioned my marriage. She said the request had come through an online portal, but that the pattern was unusual enough to make her pause. She said she had decided not to process it without speaking to me because it did not fit with my normal behavior. That was why she had called. She showed me a screen that listed timestamps and internal references. I looked at the lines of text, but I did not read them out loud. I did not need to. The main facts were clear. Someone had tried to step into my financial life at the exact moment I had been promising to share my life with Hannah. Laura asked again, in person now, if I had given anyone permission to do this. I told her calmly that I had not. I said that no one outside my marriage had any right to access my accounts, and that even inside my marriage I had not agreed to this kind of change. I told her that the use of my marriage certificate without my knowledge troubled me. She nodded and said she understood. Then she explained what she had already done. She had placed a hold on any structural changes to that account. She had added a note requiring direct verbal confirmation from me for any future requests. She offered to add a second layer of security, a special password known only to me. I agreed and chose one. Then she told me gently that if this pattern repeated, the bank might have to treat it as attempted fraud. She used that word. It hung in the air for a moment. She said that in those cases, they might open an internal case and could involve formal reports. She advised me to keep records of any conversations about this, especially messages where people talked openly about my accounts or funds. I thought about the family dinner, the printed agenda, the talk about structure and rules. I thought about Patricia calling herself the one who would oversee big expenses. I thought about Hannah suggesting that we put her mother on one account for emergencies. Laura asked if I had any questions. I told her I wanted to make a few structural changes of my own. I asked her to stop my salary from going into that particular account and to move it instead to a smaller one that was not tied to any shared information. I told her I would also be opening an account with another institution later in the week. She said that was common when people wanted extra separation. She offered to prepare a printed summary of the attempted changes, with all the internal references and times, so that I would have it if I needed to show anyone. I said that would be helpful. She did not hand me the papers then. She said she would put them in a sealed envelope for me to pick up the next day. That way, they would not be forgotten or mixed with other documents. When I left the bank, the sky was overcast. I checked my phone. There was a message from my brother, Ryan. He was still in town for another day before he had to go back to his job at the shop. He asked if I had time to grab coffee or something stronger. I texted him the address of a small cafe near the bank and told him I'd be there in 10 minutes. The cafe was quiet, with wooden tables and a faint smell of roasted beans. Ryan was already there when I walked in, wearing a faded t-shirt and a tired look. He stood up, hugged me in that quick, rough way he had, and then sat back down. He asked how the first married Monday was going. I told him it depended on which part of my life he meant. I started from the beginning. Patricia's speech at the reception, the bank call, the meeting at her house, the printed agenda, Hannah's reaction. I kept my voice low. Ryan listened without interrupting, but his jaw clenched tighter as I talked. When I finished, he shook his head slowly. He said that what they were doing was not normal and not just rude. He said it sounded like they were trying to trap me financially, piece by piece. He used the phrase targeted financial abuse, which was not a phrase I had expected to hear from him. He said he had seen something similar happen to a guy who came into the shop once, a man who was being drained by extended family. I told him I had always known Patricia liked control, but I had not fully seen what that meant for me until now. I told him about the marriage certificate attached to the bank request. Ryan looked like he wanted to go knock on their door and say something loud. That was his style. Mine was different. He reminded me then of our father. He reminded me of the talks at the kitchen table, of the day our father had mentioned setting up something for me, just in case life ever got complicated. Ryan said that Dad had not done all that work with the lawyer for nothing. He told me it was time to use the protections that already existed instead of just trusting that people would behave. I told him about the card from Martin Hale, about the annual review appointment that had popped up on my phone. Ryan said that if that was not a sign, he did not know what was. He told me to go, tell the lawyer everything, and let professionals handle the legal side. He said he knew I liked to solve things calmly, but that this was bigger than a disagreement about decor. He said that people who saw me as a quiet man might think I was weak. He told me to let them keep thinking that while I took care of things the right way. We sat there for a while after that, not saying much. He drank his coffee. I watched people pass by the window, carrying bags, looking at their phones, living lives that did not include mothers-in-law with printouts. Before we parted, Ryan told me that whatever happened, I was not alone, and that if I needed him later, he would drive back. He meant it. That helped. On the way home, my phone buzzed with new notifications. When I parked outside our apartment building, I checked them. There was a new group chat on my phone titled something with the Carson family name. Patricia had created it. She had added me, Hannah, her other children, and Ken. The first messages were long. She wrote about how happy she was that I was now officially part of their network. She talked about the many ways they would support us. Then the messages turned to concrete plans. She suggested a big family vacation later in the year and named a resort that was clearly expensive. She wrote that the timing was perfect, now that, in her mind, we would be sharing resources. She hinted that since I had a good salary and no children yet, the main part of the cost would be easy for me to handle. Others in the chat reacted with excited emojis and comments about finally traveling in style. I scrolled further. There were lines where she referred again to the family system, to everyone contributing into one pot, to the importance of unity. There were small jabs about how some people did not like change, but that they would see the benefits soon. Separately, there were private messages from Hannah. She wrote that her mother was still upset about how I had spoken at the house. She said that Patricia felt disrespected. Hannah asked if I could apologize to her and agree to at least talk about the account changes again. She wrote that it would mean a lot to her if I tried to see things from Patricia's point of view. Reading those messages, I did not feel anger boiling over. I felt something cooler, more focused. Each line felt like another small piece of evidence of how Patricia saw me and my role. It was not just about one speech, it was a whole plan. I started saving things. I took screenshots of the group chat, of the mentions of shared resources, of the expectation that I would fund big trips. I saved Hannah's messages where she described Patricia's feelings and the pressure to apologize. I created a new folder on my phone and gave it a simple name, something boring, so that no one looking over my shoulder would notice. Then I opened my calendar app again. The appointment with Hale and Associates was still there for later in the week. I modified it slightly and added a note for myself. Bring everything. Back upstairs, the apartment smelled faintly of leftover flowers from the wedding. There were still bags with gifts and cards in the corner. Hannah was sitting on the couch with her laptop, scrolling through photos from the reception. She asked how my day at work had been. I told her it had been normal. I did not share details about the bank meeting or the cafe conversation yet. I was not ready to argue. I was still collecting facts. Later that afternoon, while Hannah was on a call in the bedroom with the door half closed, my phone rang again. This time, it was the number of Martin Hale's office. His assistant reminded me about the upcoming review and asked if I still planned to attend. I said I did and asked if I could extend the time, since there were some new issues I needed to discuss. She said that would be fine and that Mr. Hale would review any documents I sent in advance. I told her I would bring materials in person instead. In the evening, as I was cleaning up the small mountain of envelopes on the kitchen table, a new email notification appeared on my phone. The sender was Hale and Associates. The subject line mentioned a proposed structure for a family discussion and suggested that, once we spoke in the office, I might want to invite Hannah's family to a formal meeting later in the week. There was an attachment, a document whose name included words like agenda and discussion points. I could see the file icon and the size, but I did not open it yet. I did not need to read the lines inside to know that my life had just shifted one more step towards something more serious and more controlled. I put the phone face down on the table and sat there in the quiet kitchen, listening to the faint sound of Hannah's voice in the other room, while that unopened document waited in my inbox like a small, heavy stone. The day of my meeting at Hale & Associates, I left work early. I told my manager I had to deal with some legal paperwork connected to my father's estate and my recent marriage. He wished me luck and reminded me that I still had unused vacation days. On any other week, that would have sounded nice. On that day, it just felt distant. The law office was on the 8th floor of an older office building downtown. The waiting area had low chairs, framed certificates, and the quiet sound of a radio playing classical music. The receptionist greeted me by name and asked me to wait. She spoke softly, the way people do in places where serious conversations happen. After a few minutes, Martin Hale came out of his office. He looked exactly as I remembered him. Gray hair, neat suit, calm eyes. He shook my hand, asked how I'd been, and led me into a conference room. When the door closed behind us, he asked how married life was treating me. I gave a small, tight smile and said that was what I needed to talk about. I told him everything, starting with the wedding speech. I described the way Patricia had taken the microphone, the rules she announced, the mention of a family fund. Then I moved on to the bank call, the use of the marriage certificate, the attempt to add her as an authorized person, the meeting at her house, the printed agenda, the talk about centralizing all money under her control. He listened the way good lawyers listen, without interrupting, without showing too much reaction, but with small signs that he was marking each important detail in his mind. When I finished, he leaned back and asked a few simple questions. He asked if I had any proof of these actions and statements. I told him about Laura at the bank, about the sealed envelope I would be picking up, about the family group chat, and about the screenshots I had already saved. He was quiet for a moment, then said that my father had been vivid in his warnings about people trying to exploit me financially. He said that when they drafted my trust documents, they had discussed possible scenarios. He had not expected them to include a mother-in-law with a microphone, but the principles were the same. He explained in plain terms that the trust was structured in a way that allowed for protective changes if someone close to me tried to control or drain my resources. He said there were clauses about respect, independence, and undue influence. He used those words, undue influence. He pointed out that using a marriage certificate to push changes at a bank during a ceremony might fit that description. He proposed a course of action. We would review the existing documents in detail, then prepare amendments to protect my position and limit any access that could be claimed through the marriage. We would also create a clear document for Hannah, something that laid out boundaries, what I was willing to share, what I was not, and what behavior would end her claim to certain benefits. He said some people called that a postnuptial agreement. We did not write it that second. We talked about structure, about timing, about how to present it. He suggested that any serious conversation with the Carsons happen in a controlled setting, not in their kitchen, not in a hallway argument. He said that if we pushed back against social pressure with formal rules, they would understand more clearly that this was not a joke. After our discussion, we went over some papers. I signed forms he placed in front of me. I watched him make notes to himself. He said he would handle filings and notices on his end. He also said, almost as an aside, that if the bank attempts continued, we would have enough to escalate. From the law office, I went to the courthouse to drop off what he had prepared. The lobby smelled like old paper and cleaning fluid. A clerk stamped what needed stamping and slid copies back to me without commentary. To them, I was just another person with a stack of forms. To me, those forms meant distance between my life and Patricia's plans. Later that day, I sat in a quiet room at the public library with my laptop and a pile of printed screenshots and notes. I spread everything out. Conversations from the Carson group chat, messages from Hannah, notes from my talk with Laura, a list Martin had helped me make about key incidents. I sorted them into folders, one for the bank, one for the lawyer, one for myself. When I finished, I opened a new message on my phone and wrote to Patricia and the rest of the family group. I said that I wanted to have a proper dinner later in the week to talk about expectations and make sure everyone was on the same page. I chose my words carefully. I wrote that I wanted things to be clear and that I believed in handling important matters with respect and structure. Patricia replied quickly. She said she was glad I was finally ready to discuss things like an adult and that she appreciated my willingness to join the family system. Hannah sent me a separate message saying she was proud of me for reaching out and that this dinner would fix everything. On the evening of the dinner, I arrived at the restaurant early. It was an upscale place with soft lighting and white tablecloths. The host led me to a private room at the back. There was a long table with polished glasses and folded napkins. I placed a sealed envelope at each seat. I did not open them. I did not peek inside. I had already gone over the contents with Martin. Next to my own place, I set a single, thicker folder. I sat for a moment in the empty room, listening to the murmur of the main dining area through the wall, feeling the weight of the coming conversation. Then I heard familiar voices outside. The door opened. Patricia walked in first, smiling widely, followed by Hannah and the rest of her family. The host closed the door behind them. I reached into my pocket, took out my phone, and set it on the table with the screen facing down. The small red recording light reflected faintly in the polished wood as Patricia cleared her throat and announced that she wanted to start by explaining the new rules. Patricia started talking before anyone even sat down. She said she wanted to make sure everyone understood how money would work from now on. She said that since I had invited them to dinner, she assumed I was ready to accept the family system and move forward. I let her talk. I watched her lay out the same structure she had described in her kitchen: central account, joint fund, her oversight. She spoke as if decisions had already been made and this evening was just a formality. When she finally paused, I thanked her in a level voice for explaining her view. I said that I wanted to share mine. I reached out and tapped my phone screen. I said that, for my own records, I was going to record the discussion. I made it clear I wanted everyone to be aware. Patricia waved a hand and said she was not worried, that she had nothing to hide. Hannah looked uneasy, but she did not object. I opened the thick folder by my plate. I told them that before I could agree to any system, I needed to address what had already happened. I slid a set of papers toward Patricia and Ken. I said they were copies of the bank's internal record of the attempted changes to my account on the day of the wedding. I summarized what Laura had confirmed: an online request during the ceremony, an attempt to add Patricia as an authorized person, instructions to move a large sum into a new account with her name, and the use of a scan of our marriage certificate. I pointed out the timestamps. Patricia tried to laugh it off. She said she had only tried to help with paperwork, that it was a misunderstanding, that she thought I would be fine with it. I reminded her that she had never spoken to me about that specific step and that she had chosen a moment when I was distracted at the altar. Then I told them that, after that attempt, the bank had locked down my accounts and added extra verification. I said that if anything similar happened again, the bank was prepared to treat it as attempted fraud. I used the exact term Laura had used. I saw Ken's expression change at that word. Next, I opened a second section of the folder. I told them that my father had set up a trust with help from Mr. Hale years ago. I explained that it contained clauses about undue influence, about anyone who tried to control or disrespect me in order to reach my money. I said that recent events met those conditions. I told Hannah, clearly and without anger, that as of that afternoon, her status as a direct beneficiary had been suspended and moved into a conditional category. I said that the change did not come from spite. It came from the written rules my father had put in place and that I had now chosen to enforce. I said that those rules existed to protect me from exactly this kind of pressure. I indicated the sealed envelope in front of her. I told her it contained a post-nuptial agreement prepared by Hale. I summarized it. Separate finances, no access for Patricia to our accounts, clear boundaries on what would be shared, and a requirement for counseling if we wanted to continue as a married couple. I said that if she chose not to sign it, the trust would revert to me alone, with further instructions already filed. Hannah's eyes filled with tears. She said I was punishing her for her mother's behavior. I answered that I was protecting myself from a system that treated me like a wallet to be managed. I said that she still had a choice. I did not tell her what to do. I just laid out the consequences of each path. Then I turned back to Patricia. I slid another envelope toward her. I said it contained a formal record drafted by Hale, documenting her attempts to gain access to my accounts and influence my decisions. I said that, for now, that record sat with my lawyer and the bank, not with any authority, but that if she pushed again, it could move. Her face went pale. She said I was threatening her. I told her I was setting boundaries and putting them in writing, the same way she liked to do with her rules. I said that from this point on, she had no role in my finances. None. I said that I had already instructed both my bank and my employer to ignore any contact from her. The room fell quiet. There was no clink of silverware, no small talk, only the sound of people breathing and the distant noise from the main dining area. I stood up. I told them calmly that I was leaving. I said that Hannah could call me after she had read everything and thought about what she wanted. I said that until then, I would not be part of their family fund, their group chat, or their plans. I picked up my phone, ended the recording, and walked to the door. As I stepped out into the hallway, I heard Patricia's voice rise inside the room, sharp and panicked, and Hannah's muffled sobs. A moment later, my phone buzzed with a notification from the bank app, confirming that my security settings had been updated and that no external contacts were authorized. I left the restaurant, blocked the Carson family chat, and walked into the night without looking back.